Hey travelers, it's me, Caroline, Kim, and Xander, and this is
Immersive Storytelling. Hey travelers.
Hey travelers. Welcome Amber, our first guest. This is an exciting day for us.
Amazing. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
So you might notice a new traveler or host with us today. This is our first in a series of live interviews, live to us, recorded for you, of course. And today we welcome Amber Simpson. Amber is currently a business affairs executive at a legacy media company specializing in strategic negotiations for media rights and programming. She's a Web3 spatial media evangelist, exploring use cases and how these can be adapted to innovate in the sports and entertainment industries. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you for that thorough introduction.
Absolutely. So we can just dive right in. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the immersive industry, and we'd love to hear some of your insights today on immersive storytelling. So our first segment is news that's been making waves all year, the Apple Vision Pro. Yeah, so we're going to give you an overview of the Apple Vision Pro as a groundbreaking spatial computer, So with that, how do you see devices like the Apple Pro transforming the landscape of immersive entertainment, especially in theme parks or experiences for media companies like Disney?
Yeah, so I sort of see the opportunity in extending beyond just the ride. So when you're at a theme park, you're walking around, you're taking in the sights. I think especially Disney in particular does a great job with their set dressing. So they immerse you in the world when you're in line. But now if you're able to add, the Apple Vision Pro kind of technology, spatial computing, now you think about layering gamification, scavenger hunts, like extending the experience so that your whole theme park is essentially one big ride, as opposed to those few minutes you may spend jumping on the ride after standing in line for sometimes it can be an hour or more.
Amazing. That totally makes sense. And how innovative that goes to just extending the experience beyond that peak moment of actually doing the ride. That's really cool. And while we're talking about it, Disney and Epic Games had that $1.5 billion announcement for a new venture. And one of the things I really love about Fortnite as a longtime player is the loading screens. Kind of similarly make it really interactive and have like mini games, and you can run around the map, and just that's been one of the places of innovation for video games, like what to do with the loading time. So it seems like the immersive tech IRL is also unlocking similar capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because right now it's a headset. So like, how does that work around the park? I think there's a lot of sort of practical adaptation questions, but in terms of the potential of the technology, it's huge and, particularly I think significant at theme parks where it's all, your whole day is an experience. And so, having this additional ability, like we mentioned, the idea of the gamification or having additional content or information at your fingertips. There's the creative aspect and then also just the logistical aspect of finding your way around the park, different sort of possibilities that this kind of technology opens up to make it a more sort of seamless, I think, experience for park goers.
With the Vision Pro's advanced spatial audio and ultra high resolution displays, what new storytelling opportunities do you see for the creators?
I think that an opportunity that opens up is to tell from more of like a first person experience as opposed to a third person where you're sort of passively, viewing and watching, the story in front of you. I think a great sort of benefit of this kind of technology is now fans and the audience can be brought into the world that they're watching. And so maybe I think about like if you have the opportunity to walk through the Seattle Grace hallways, if you're a Grey's Anatomy fan, or experiencing the time period, watching The Crown, or even something like sitting in on like Coach Lasso's pre-game speech. For those who are Ted Lasso fans, I think it just really puts you at the center of the story instead of just watching and observing the story. And so that's where I kind of see the interesting opportunities for storytelling, just to make it more sort of direct and personal than, it's been with traditional media.
Do you think the Apple Vision Pro, is that going to become the standard for movie viewing experiences, the immersed big screens? Do you think eventually at some point that will become the new standard?
I mean, right now, I would say no. We'll see how the technology and experiences develop. But I do, like, for me personally, I still think that there's a unique experience going to the movies, particularly for certain kinds of entertainment. A movie like Barbie or Black Panther, like being with a community and watching those movie magic moments with a larger audience. I think there's something that's still special there. Where I sort of see the sort of next phase and integration of the Apple Vision Pro is more so to, again, like extending the experience. So like back in the day, if anyone remembers behind the scenes or director's cuts or that you would get with DVDs or, Blu-ray.
Yes, yeah.
So it's like that same kind of thing where there's opportunity for ancillary content to tell other stories, to maybe even some UGC, like an opportunity for a user to kind of write their own ending, or different sort of ancillary experiences that extend the IP outside of the actual theater. But I think there's still something that's special about the in-person theater experience. So I don't necessarily see it galvanizing or sort of taking over, the theaters from that standpoint.
That's cool. That this was something that kind of, you just said, inspired me. But yeah, nostalgia is one of the biggest forces like we've seen as far as marketing for brands. So I think, yeah, maybe not replacing the movie going experience, but yeah, augmenting it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even in the theaters with the technology, like if you're in the theater and have the headset, like you can see things that are there, I think that could really enrich the experience too. But similar to like how streaming is an alternative, but there's still, of course, the movie going experience. So that sounds like a brave new future. I'm really excited to venture into. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So next we can
those opportunities too, and just again to have like to engage with the IP and these characters in a different way, and again become more of a participant instead of just a viewer.
I love that. Yeah, it's like what happens after the story communal experience is experience, like what happens after you leave the theater, it seems like is this opportunity to play around with these new technologies. And I think at least for me, like from a symbolic and storytelling perspective, dating back to ancient times, all of the different gods and goddesses, they all have these symbols. And there was like a certain framework, but then at the same time, the stories passed down about how the peacock got its eyes or so on and so forth. They have just a context that, the community sort of can piece together, but Demeter might mean something different to someone than someone else. And so the way that the characters and the stories evolve from outside of the original intent or the original script is really cool. I think is something that I think is definitely taking fold today, and it is powered by these sort of immersive technologies, and also the internet, of course, but it makes it all possible so that we can share, I guess, community experiences outside of the screen. It's like what happens after, I guess, you leave the theater. So it doesn't stop there. Yeah,
maybe even teasing before. There's a lot of anticipation and excitement, and so that could also sort of enhance the leading into the actual experience of being at the movie. So there's just a lot, I think, around the movies itself, and everything we're talking about is just an extension, sort of extending, expanding, building on what's on the screen.
One thing you touched on was intellectual property, and we have a question here relative to generative AI and entertainment. And our question is, from a legal and partnerships perspective, what are the challenges or some challenges and opportunities presented by the integration of generative AI in entertainment?
Yeah, I think from an opportunity standpoint, it's similar to other industries, that maybe there will be some efficiencies. So, do I see, and again, a lot of these topics were touched on in the recent negotiations with SAG and the WGA. And so obviously this is top of mind for talent, and understandably so. But I think we're not going to see necessarily major studios having scripts that are written entirely by AI. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about maybe finding some efficiencies with talent if they're not available for some reason. Is there a VO or some sort of production pickup that maybe generative AI technology can help fill, so you don't lose time or you don't lose money? And so I see it more so being used from an efficiency standpoint rather than creatively integrating. Again, and this is just kind of, I would say, the first phase. It'll be interesting to see how the technology and the use evolves. But I think in sort of the short term, it's really more so, how do we benefit from some of the shortcuts that maybe generative AI can help provide when it comes to timing, when it comes to cost, when it comes to some of those considerations when you're working on a production.
If you could elaborate on how you envision generative AI influencing the creative process and storytelling across the entertainment industry.
I mean, obviously right now are guardrails under the respective writers and, actors agreements that you need approval of talent. It's not going to circumvent like whether or not they qualify for pay. And so there are some of those, protections built into the deals. But I think about with research, right? So a lot of times writers going into a script, there may be some research that generative AI can help fast track to get for the writer to be able to get a script turned around, more quickly. And so, I see it more so in that capacity. And then I think creatively right now, it'll be interesting. I think there will certainly be some who will experiment with it outside of the traditional, entertainment space, maybe with animation, in particular. And so I'm just waiting for sort of that first kind of animated story that's using some of these technologies. And again, it also comes as the technology themselves sort of adapt and improve. But yeah, I think creatively right now, it's more so, I think, in sort of the time, what's going into, the research, the background, sort of filling in the gaps, I would say, when it comes to productions.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely in exciting times, and it's always something to be cognizant of, is just embracing the tools that we've paved the way to have right now, and they're here and they're not going anywhere. And so just learning from individuals such as yourself on how, creatives and storytellers can use these to skyrocket or supercharge their creative process or workflow is huge. And I think that we can take away any sort of barriers that used to sort of be in the way before, and kind of view this as a helpful tool or a helpful partner, if you will, to help make the dreams come alive. I'll turn it over to Kim, and I think we're going to go through some sports immersive tech and name, image, and likeness conversations. But yeah, pass it.
know we have here, we touched on it a bit before, but I'm not sure if we dove into deep about the Disney and Epic Games venture.
Again, I don't have, specific insights into the partnership itself or kind of what's being planned or contemplated creatively, but it was, obviously a significant announcement from the company, and I think a very smart and interesting approach. So definitely excited to see how it comes together.
Awesome. Do you feel like it might in some way innovate the entertainment industry?
Yeah, it seems to be one of those deals that could sort of fast track maybe other developments at, other companies. But I think one, it's very organic for Disney. Disney holds a lot of, franchise IP from Star Wars to Marvel, which is a, natural and synergistic fit for its content and its characters. And so I kind of see potential opportunities to, one, maybe introduce new characters, stories, because let's be honest, there's only so much content you can produce in a year. So I think, this idea of a Disney world, and I'm using, quotes, is, great for fans to maybe interact in a more direct way with their favorite characters, to tell stories of characters that, maybe there wasn't time for or aren't going to make it to, the screen for whatever reason. So I just think it's really interesting. I think I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how it comes to fruition. And I think another sort of key potential benefit is, again, going back to the user generated content and what opportunities and experiences might be there for users to create their own stories and characters and integrate them into, the stories. I think that will be, interesting and exciting to see as well.
Thank you so much for that. I know just from the noise it's been making on LinkedIn, it's been a lot of user generated content just from the marketing side. It's been, I just scroll and it's just LinkedIn posts of everyone seems to be very excited. As someone who's been in the immersive space for 9 years, I was seeing these big players like Disney embracing the metaverse, it's been very, I guess, refreshing. So I'm excited. And on that note, with the intersections of sports, immersive tech, and NIL, with technologies like VR and AR, how do you see the future of fan engagement in sports evolving, especially considering the personalized experiences these technologies can offer, and what role could athletes and rights play in creating these personalized immersive experiences?
Yeah, so I sort of see as a first phase or step the opportunity, again, to, put fans into the game, so to speak. So, for instance, seeing a home run from the perspective of the fan who caught the ball, or experiencing what 100-mile-an-hour fastball, coming your way over the plate is like. And so I think there's a lot of different, elements depending on the sport that can give more of a direct sort of experience for fans. And I think about the 50-yard line seats or courtside seats, yes, they're the most expensive, but there's also a different perspective when you're watching the game at that level. And so I think something like that, an opportunity for fans to kind of experience the athletes, how fast they're moving, how hard the hits are, all those sort of elements to the game that maybe don't translate the same way in traditional sort of television or media. I think these sort of AR and VR experiences can open up the game and put the fan basically within the game itself. And I think every sport, sort of depending on the area, there might be different sort of features or benefits. I think about hockey in particular. as a fan, like being there in person is a very different experience from watching at home. So are there also opportunities to sort of bring that live in-person experience to the viewer at home? And so can you use, you know, VR and AR to sort of recreate the lightness? So like when you're in a hockey arena and you have the reflection of the ice, that's different than sitting at home. Like, is that something that can be translated through these technologies? And so I think it just opens up more of a direct experience for fans, and then also allows fans to like personalize and curate their experience. So instead of watching on the television and maybe following your bets on a phone and maybe messaging with your friends on another device, now it's sort of integrated. And so you're able to seamlessly sort of, you know, interact throughout the game experience and, you know, pull up stats, communicate with other fans, watch from a certain angle, from a certain perspective. So I think it's just, it's limitless, the potential opportunities that these kinds of technologies can bring. And then it also makes me think about the Formula One experience that you had mentioned, Xander, and showed with being able to sort of watch on television, but then also have the experience of the extended reality of the track in your home and being able to watch the race and see the leaderboard and just sort of seamlessly sort of integrate the full experience of, you know, watching sports.
I love that.
Oh, good.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, if you want to go, but
No, you're good.
it's exciting here because I previously worked at Intel Sports, and everything they hit was very spot on about like just different perspectives. And one of the demos prototypes that I love putting people in was putting people on the NFL like stadium, and it was so mind blowing to people how big players were, because like we would freak out. I had like high VPs and of company like different companies like freaking out and like having to sit down because they were like, wow, I didn't realize they're so big. Or only in VR can you get like slam dunked by a basketball player. The amount of perspectives you have, it's very eye-opening. And you can see, it's just like, I always love seeing the big smiles on people's faces when they're in VR, and that's how it's a good experience.
Yeah, it's a new appreciation. And so for me, watching like basketball courtside, you don't realize how closely they're moving to each other. And so like making one step and they'd be tackling each other, but their eye physicality, hand-eye coordination, all of that to be able to move so quickly and not run into each other is like pretty amazing.
Love it.
Definitely. And I was going to say, Amber, that was one of the first things we connected about when you were in the free interview penthouse. I think it was like an AI Journey X1 party. But yeah, the sports immersion. And of course, we've been talking with Fightopia and the MMA, the immersive MMA experiences, like you said, both of you said, you and Kim, with just being able to really internalize the motion aspect,
Right.
the physicality aspect with the digital. Like that was one of my favorite comments Caroline had about it. It was like, I like how you're blending the physical, because let's admit physical combat's maybe one of the most physical things you can do with the digital realm.
Right.
So yeah, that's really very exciting to hear those insights.
Considering the immersive potential of technology such as the Apple Vision Pro for sports viewing and training, how might NIL agreements need to adapt to protect athletes' rights while also leveraging these new forms of content delivery?
Yeah, so I think probably just generally like rights enforcement. And so there's this legal sort of catch-all that you'll see in every single deal or release that says in all media now known hereinafter devised in perpetuity throughout the world or the universe. And so I think making sure that athletes are understanding of what they're, you know, actually agreeing to or giving up when they're signing onto their deals. And so that it's, you know, limited to a specific use, a specific term, understanding exclusivity. Is that going to affect like other opportunities? So I think there are just like key deal terms that they should, be aware of. And I think also some of this, some will have representatives, maybe not all. So, hopefully the NCAA, the conferences, the universities and their athletic programs, will sort of be able to build some sort of process for their players to make sure that they're, adequately protected. And maybe they need a business affairs department. But ultimately, I think there's just the key areas of understanding the term, understanding their obligations, because that's the other thing too. When you're in school, when you have commitments to your sport, and you have practices, and you also are signing on to maybe do certain social media or other services, just to make sure that they are actually able to fulfill their obligations, they understand what they are, and then just maybe limiting the term, the use, and then understanding the exclusivity. I would say those are kind of like the 4 keys when they're thinking about their deals.
Awesome. I know, especially like the legalness around it, especially when you're handling a lot of data, is a big thing. Because another thing that I know from being in immersive sports world is it was always like, if you're training the data with players' data, we had to be very careful. It's like the NBA wasn't going to let us use that data for anything else other than what was in the agreement and what we like agreed on, or like the NFL. You couldn't just use that to train something else. Legal agreements are very important.
Right. And there are a lot of privacy considerations. And then also, to the extent it's crossing into anything that may potentially be perceived as like medically related as well. So you do have to be careful with, how the data is used, whether it's personal information or, other medical and other information that may be related to the players, or, even the fans and users, and how that information may be collected.
I think we covered all the questions that we had planned out, but opening up to anyone, if anyone would like to ask or touch on anything.
One thing I'd love to, I was kind of considering with kind of going back to the deal between Disney and Epic Games. So being a father, and my kids, like, they love when the characters like come into Fortnite. As a matter of fact, like all of their most rich media characters, from Aliens to Star Wars, of course, everything in the Disney family, but all of this IP, whenever it enters Fortnite, it's like anytime they see it outside Fortnite, like, oh yeah, I recognize that from Fortnite. So it kind of gives them a cross-generational view of all of this IP. And I think even maybe it might even strengthen the brand, having that partnership, because the kids can actually like embody these characters from, the time they're children in these games. They can actually like have physical merchandise, digital merchandise, have a digital avatar of, let's say, Wreck-It Ralph. And they can play with him and interact with their friends as him. So like we all used to do in pretend time, just everyone can see it. So I think that was a really interesting kind of aspect you brought up with the IP integration.
Yeah. And I just think that Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they engage differently. And so they don't want to be passive, observers. They want to engage, they want to participate. And so, I think this kind of partnership as between Disney and Epic sort of reaches, that sort of next generation who will grow up, and who your son one day will maybe have his own kids. And so like they're going to be engaging, and he's going to pass down what he experienced from Fortnite and his experiences with these characters. And so I do see that it's, I think, speaking to the times and kind of where media and entertainment, the industries are evolving. And so again, it's almost, it seems like it's getting bigger and bigger, but in the best way. So I think that's, a really key point, and why I also agree that that kind of partnership certainly is a natural, I think, an organic next step for, a company like Disney. And also to that point, I just think generally, like, you're not going to given the way that engagement, you know, is moving with these younger generations, you're not going to necessarily measure success in like a single viewership, like a single box opening or, you know, a single night of a rating. It's going to be, I think, more encompassing. And so you're going to be looking at, you know, how is the audience engaging with our IP? Like, we're looking at the total engagement, not just a singular viewership. And so that's kind of where, you know, I see this heading, and where this technology can sort of pick up. And again, everything that we've been talking about in terms of extending, you know, those experiences. And so now it's really, you know, you're measuring engagement with the IP, not necessarily one sort of moment in time.
That was awesome. The only other thing I was thinking, I don't know if it might be worth like I should have thought of this beforehand, but maybe like a 30-second explanation of kind of what the NIL is and why it's like important. I don't know if we kind of talked about it, but I don't know if we went over like for some of our listeners, travelers who may not know what that is.
Sure. So NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. And so historically, student athletes have not been allowed to sort of pursue opportunities using their name, image, and likeness. And so it was a rule that was instituted by the NCAA. They were deemed amateur athletes, and so they weren't allowed to be compensated for their NIL. They couldn't, you know, go out and get endorsements. They couldn't be paid for commercials, be paid for personal appearances. Like, all of that was restricted. And so what, you know, ultimately happened after a series of lawsuits and changes within the rules is that student athletes now have this opportunity to be able to be compensated. So they can now pursue endorsements. They can get sponsors on social media. They can get paid to, you know, appear in promotion, commercials, content. So they can also, you know, create their own sort of products and market those as well. So that change has happened over the last couple of years. It's still in a very early stage. And one of the complicating factors is that there is no federal legal framework. So everything is sort of state to state. So obviously you have conferences that cover schools in multiple states. So like even in a singular conference, they don't necessarily have the same laws and rules that govern the athletes at the various schools. Legislation on the table at a federal level to unify, you know, some of the laws across the states. And so that there's more of an understanding of like what is permitted, what isn't permitted. Again, some of that can be, you know, dealt with via contract, but some of these laws, it is beneficial for there to be like a universal framework so that if, you know, I'm a school and I'm wanting to, you know, pursue a certain kind of deal, I'm not then maybe permitted to do it here. But then if we were traveling with the team in another state, like maybe there would be restrictions around, you know, what you're able to do. So it can get a little bit complicated. And so again, they are moving into having some uniformity in the laws and the rules and guidelines around NIL. But it's, you know, been a huge door to open. I think women's sports and female athletes have been, you know, major beneficiaries of these rules opening up. And so overall, I think it's, you know, going to be a net positive for the athletes. It's a lot of heavy lifting on the administrative, you know, side and sort of sorting through some of these, you know, loose ends. But I think, you know, it's also going to be a net gain for the universities and the conference and collegiate sports as a whole.
That was a great explanation.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I felt like I learned a lot too.
Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you so much, Amber, for joining us today. Really insightful answers and giving us a lot to contemplate and maybe even discuss on further episodes. So thank you for joining us and taking time out of your schedule. It was an absolute pleasure.
Of course. Thank you all. It was great to be here. And again, thank you for working through the technical issues earlier on. I'm glad we were able to figure it out and get through it. So thank you all. It was so nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you. It's nice to speak to you in full speed.
Yeah, exactly.
See you on the next episode.
Immersive
Storytelling.